Hi, I'm Holly, and today I'm going to talk about a tool that I use in my Latin 1 classes for introducing the concept of grammatical case to my 10th graders. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can show you the tool that I'm talking about. This is something that I developed during the pandemic when I was teaching my Latin classes virtually for over a year. And I didn't have the luxury of printing out and handing out worksheets for my students to use. What I did was I originally used this on the application, the Google application Jamboard, which is why this is called a Gramboard, because like many high school teachers, I think that I'm really funny and clever. Um, and so, um, Even though Jamboard no longer exists and I now have to make these in Google Slides, I still really like the name Gramboard, so it stuck. And so basically what this is diagramming sentences. Um, but it's a more interactive way to do it because instead of just like writing things on their paper, they're moving tiles around on their screens, which I make with text boxes. Um, so this is what a completed one looks like. The idea behind this is I want to help my students to understand how a Latin sentence works on an abstract level. They can do just fine memorizing that the nominative case indicates the subject and the accusative case indicates the direct object. But when it comes to applying this, that's where we hit some speed bumps often. I'm not sure about sharing pedagogical techniques in videos this way because everyone's students and context and curricula are very, very different. So I don't know how helpful this is going to be to anyone, but I'm putting it out there just in case anyone has a similar context as me and finds it useful. Um, like I said, this is what a useful one looks useful. A completed one looks like. I'll walk you through one in just a second. In my Latin 1 curriculum, I start with the nominative and accusative cases. Um, I don't know how people usually do it, but that's how I do mine. And then I gradually add the cases on as we go throughout the semester. I only have my Latin 1 students for one semester for 80-minute blocks, 5 days a week. You'll see here that I include the translation. The entire idea behind the Gramboard is to alleviate cognitive load and only have them focus on one thing at a time. So I'm not testing their vocabulary comprehension. I'm not testing their reading comprehension. I'm testing whether or not they understand what's going on in the sentence and how the words are interacting with each other on an abstract level. So that's why that's there. I also kind of want to get them used to the idea of how Latin works differently from English. And so if they can see the English sentence there and understand what's going on, what's the subject, the verb, the object, then when they go to label a Latin sentence, they can see how it's the endings, it's something else at play that tells you what's going on rather than the word order most of the time. So, for example, in this sentence right here, um, you can see that I put the direct object first on purpose. I switched the SVO order of English to kind of help them see that. Um, so the way that I instruct them to do it is to go from left to right, from the blue tiles to the pink and green to the yellow and gray. They don't have to label the verb first. They can label whatever they want, whatever their heart desires, whatever they spot first or understand first, right? So they do have to label who's doing the action. In this case, Rhea Silvia has two names. There's two words, so they have to label both of them. Martin receives the action. He's the one being loved, and the action or state of being is amat. And then they have to go through and say, okay, so the one doing the action is the subject. And the one that receives the action is the direct object. And the action or state of being is the verb, the thing that's being done. And the one in the nominative case is the subject, so that's the doer of the action. And both of these words pertain to the same person, which is doing the action, which is the subject. The verb is third person singular because we learned that last unit, and it doesn't have a case, which sometimes is a sticking point, which is another reason why the Gramboards I have found that they are helpful in class to help reinforce. Not every word in Latin has a case. Some of them have personal endings. And then the direct object receives the action, and that's in the accusative case. Um, I also give them other sentences that show them that there doesn't have to be a direct object, right? Sometimes there's only two words there, so that they can kind of play with that idea and not always be thinking about, wait, where's the direct object? In another version of the Gramboard, which I haven't made yet, I want to make one where they have to label the verbs as either transitive or intransitive to kind of further teach this concept to them. I also have another Gramboard. No, I didn't put it in here. Um, when I'm teaching them the nominative and accusative cases where there actually is nothing but verbs in the sentence, to show them that you don't even have to have a subject because you have personal endings on verbs. So you can have something, for example, like nolo discadere. So you label both of those as verbs, and they just have to identify which one is the indicative one, first person singular, and which one is the infinitive. And so I'm going to show you the directions that are on the board while they're doing this. So aside from like the obvious of like where to find it on Google Classroom, um, there's also this kind of thing right here. So in case they forget this like chart down in the bottom left, in case they forget what is what for a while, I'll give it to them while they're practicing kind of identifying these things. Again, just trying to reduce the cognitive load. And then up in the top right, I take a screenshot of the first one, which I walk them through together the first time. And then I have my fancy embedded timer in the slide right there. 10 minutes is usually sufficient. And then as we go, so like after they've mastered the nominative and accusative cases, I'll add on the genitive case and then the dative case and then the ablative case. And as we go, this chart down here gets longer and longer. It eventually gets to here where they have all of the cases added on there. Um, and a lot of times when I'm teaching them other cases, like especially the ablative case, I don't teach them every single use all at once. Of course, I just add them on gradually. And so they just have to identify certain ones at certain times, right? Um, like that. And you may be thinking, well, like, shouldn't they be associating the cases with the endings because that's what they are? And my answer is yes, they definitely should. And later on, I actually have one where they have to, once they get used to labeling what is what and how the words are interacting in the sentence, they also have to add the correct endings onto the words. That's kind of the final step. But I have found that, and again, I don't know where your students are if you're a teacher watching this, but I have found that my students have to learn their normal Latin vocabulary, and then they have to learn the grammar Latin vocabulary, nominative, accusative, person, number, conjugation, declension, all of those things. Um, but then they also have to learn how to think about a sentence in an abstract way, and how the words are interacting with each other, doing the action, receiving the action, being the action, um, that kind of thing, indirect objects, possession, what have you. And sometimes that abstract concept is doesn't even match up with the actual picture of what's happening that is created in your head when you read a sentence. And so that's another hump that we have to get over. And then they need to be able to correctly interpret the endings so that they understand what case it is and what role it is and how that brings the sentence together. Um, And so I don't do everything all at once. Again, it's a cognitive load thing. I try to strip it down as basic as possible and then gradually build them up. And in this way, they can actually kind of interact with the sentence by moving around these little text box tiles that I made, and labeling the words with them. Another thing that you may be wondering is like, hey, don't you do like active Latin? Like, don't you do comprehensible input and have them learn by speaking and listening and just reading and all that stuff? And I say, yes, yes, I do. Um, we do a lot of listening comprehension and active Latin in my classroom. And many years ago, I tried to only teach using the active Latin method. Um, and like, yeah, they learned how to understand things and memorize things, basically, is what ended up happening. Um, but I found that if I teach them grammar explicitly to go with the implicit stuff that they're learning, they understand it even better. And that makes sense because I have a really good understanding, explicit understanding of the Latin grammar, and that helps me. And the more that I have come to understand Latin grammar, the better I am at speaking Latin, reading Latin, and generally understanding Latin. So, if my goal for my students is I want them to know Latin and I want them to know all of it. I want them to be able to understand it and have reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. I also want them to understand the grammar because to me, that's part of knowing Latin. And I'm not creating this video to get up on my soapbox about this kind of stuff. Do you? Um, but yeah, I do teach the grammar because I find it helps. And also, honestly, if any of my kids transfer to a different school and all they've done in my class is like TPR stories and then they go to another school and their Latin program is more grammar heavy, it's going to be kind of a shock to them. And I wouldn't want them to feel like they were shortchanged in my class because I never taught them what a verb conjugation or a declension was. Um, and so I have concern for that as well. And it has happened that students have transferred to other schools, and I'm like, they haven't. I didn't. I didn't teach them those things. So yeah. So those are some of my thoughts that have gone into that. I think rationale, teaching philosophy, all of that stuff is another video for another time. Um, but something I would like to know from you is, does this seem like a helpful tool for you? Would you like to see more videos about pedagogical techniques that I use in my classroom? That kind of thing. So if so, whatever you have to say, good or bad, I'd love to see it in the comments. Um, as far as if you do like this and you want a copy of it to use in your own classroom, right now I only have it available on Teachers Pay Teachers, which is kind of cruddy. Um, but I put the link underneath the video. I'm hoping to get my website, my old website back up and running so that you can just download it for free because that's much nicer. Um, yeah. So if you can't wait for me to get my video, my website up and running, then you can go ahead and go on Teachers Pay Teachers and throw me a couple bucks for the use of this. But if you can wait a little bit, you'll be able to download it for free pretty soon, and I'll try to get all the different versions up there so you can choose which one is right for you. And that's it. So like I said, if you enjoyed this video, please let me know in some capacity, like the video, give me a comment. And that's it. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Vale.